Subscribe before the truth disappears, because some endings are written in pencil. The first scream was not a scream, not really. It was the sound a mother makes when her mind runs ahead of her body and discovers a world without her child. It rose off Prince Street, caught on a spring wind, and drifted down the block until it reached a bodega with the red and white awning and the line of cabs idling at the light. By the time Detective Mara Levy stepped out of her unmarked Plymouth, the sound had become a kind of silence. Neighbors with arms crossed tight, a bus driver standing uselessly on the curb, and a crossing guard pressing a trembling hand to her lips. 6-year-old Nail, the first responding officer told her, blue backpack, left the apartment for the bus stop at 8:04. The route never saw him. Mara dulled the rest into bullet points, because that was how she kept from tasting copper at the back of her tongue. She walked the route once, twice, 39 steps from the stoop to the corner, a bakery window clouded with warmth, a stack of newspapers, a smear of something sticky on the sidewalk, raspberry jam or melted candy. The bus driver swore he never saw the boy. Neighbors swore they did. Confidences collided in the cold air and left nothing clean. The mother, Evelyn, kept pointing at the corner, like it owed her an answer. He stands there every morning, she said. I told him to stay where the driver could see him. Her husband, Stan, put a hand on her shoulder as if he could hold her to the ground by force. He knows his route, he knows it. Beneath his steady voice, panic scratched at the door. The building superintendent opened the front door, and already the newsmen were here, thin hair shining under camera lights, asking questions that should have gotten stuck in their teeth. Mara shut them down and moved the family upstairs. She breathed in the apartment like it might talk to her. Crayon drawings taped at a child's height, a plastic astronaut on the radiator, a lunch bag open on the counter, an apple browning. She turned off the sink and watched the last beads of water gather their courage before falling. In missing persons work, the first hours are all knife edge. Time does not pass, it breaks. They canvassed the block. They called the precincts, the bridges, the tunnels, the hospitals. A detective named O'Connell found the crossing guard's story and pinned it to the board. She saw the boy at 8:03. She looked down to wave a taxi past. When she looked up, the spot was empty as a plate. The guard didn't cry. She apologized. She apologized until her voice went hoarse. The bodega on the corner, bright with citrus and fluorescent light, had a narrow staircase at the back that dropped to a basement. Supplies, the clerk said, not quite meeting Mara's eyes. He was young, a face too soft for the beard he wore. He told them no little boy came in. He told them his boss was in early, then left. He told them everything and nothing. When Mara asked for the basement, he wrung his hands like wet fabric. It's flooding lately, he said. It's not safe. The landlord arrived with a set of keys and a smell of stale smoke. It was never supposed to be open, he grumbled. Old coal room, rats, damp. Why risk it? He tried the knob, and it gave almost an inch before catching on something stubborn inside. See, he said, half relief, half dare, closed. Mara made a note to come back with a warrant and a crowbar. By noon, the missing posters were already running through the station copier. Blurry photo from the last birthday party, a paper crown slipping over small ears. Volunteers took stacks, promised to staple the city. The phones at the tip line began to shiver. A boy with a blue backpack near Canal. A boy getting into a car on Houston. A boy at a newsstand on Lafayette, crying. The city coughed up ghosts every time a child went missing. Everyone saw something, no one saw the thing. In the stairwell, a man named Ray with oil in his fingernails told a story he did not want. He cleaned furnaces in the neighborhood. He cut through the alley behind the bodega most mornings. There was a van, he said. Couple of days ago, beige, no plates on the front. Guy loading boxes before the shop opened. I figured deliveries, you know? He rubbed the knuckles of one hand. Didn't see his face, just the back of his head, dark hair. O'Connell scrawled van, beige, no plate in black letters. You call it in? Ray shook his head. Who calls in a van? On the second day, a Polaroid arrived at the precinct with no return address. It showed nothing helpful. A blurry shot of the corner, the bus sign leaning, a smudge that might have been a child's jacket, might have been a thumb over the lens. On the back, someone had written in cramped, slanted letters, "Look under what you pass by every day." Mara showed it to O'Connell, then to her lieutenant, who sniffed and said, "Kooks always smell the blood of a headline." She held the photo up to the fluorescent light. You could miss anything if you looked hard enough for everything. The third day, the city turned on the family. The tabloids made a carnival of their living room, counting cups on the coffee table. Perfect strangers debated whether 6-year-olds should walk alone in a city that never looked both ways. Evelyn stopped going to the window. Stan cleaned the spotless kitchen until the steel shone like water. Mara came by late and sat with them without asking questions. Sometimes the only thing a detective can give a family is company that does not require performance. Weeks saw it off. The leads bruised, then rotted. Search parties spilled into basements and rooftops, found nothing but dust, found everything but the boy. The bodega's basement stayed just out of reach. Permits delayed, paperwork misfiled, the landlord suddenly invoking structural risk. Each time Mara pressed, another official voice told her to wait. "There's no probable cause, detective. You've got a locked door and a bad feeling." She did not tell them that bad feelings built careers. Years stacked like boxes in a storage unit. The posters curled. The crossing guard moved to Florida. Ray stopped returning calls. The boy's picture appeared on milk cartons, then faded from the cartons, then returned in anniversary articles with the kind of adjectives grief hates: haunting, inexplicable, enduring. Mara kept the file on her shelf even when she transferred, even when she married and left and returned. It grew heavier every year because paper does that when you add nothing. The city changed around the case. Buildings learned new names. Streets wore new coats. Cameras perched like birds where eyes had once done the work. The bodega changed hands twice and became a corner market with glossy fruit in baskets and artisanal soda. But the basement door, she learned, remained where it always had, behind a row of mops and a sign that said, "Employees only." Decades later, a construction permit crossed Mara's desk with a name she recognized by accident, of fate, not design. The corner market was renovating, new owner, new plumbing, full gut. The basement would be opened, waterproofed, inspected, and signed off. She fed $1 into the municipal copy machine and printed out every page twice. She called O'Connell, retired now, his voice thinner but still the exact temperature for gallows humor. "You kept that file like a pet," he said. "You're gonna feed it?" On a gray morning, nobody would remember for any other reason, Mara stood again on Prince Street. The awning had a new color. The taxis were ride shares now and smelled of pine and cucumber. Children in puffy coats walked with parents whose hands hovered inches over shoulders but never touched. Inside, the contractor, a woman whose forearms could bend time, looked up from a blueprint. "You the detective?" she said. "We were told to expect you." The back hallway still had the same low ceiling. The mop bucket still squeaked. The door wore new paint and an old lock. The contractor's crew had pried the trim off and found the first surprise: screws driven from the inside, heads chewed flat by a tool that did not want them ever to come out. "We thought maybe someone sealed it in the 70s, she said, frowning. "Why do that if it's just a coal room?" Mara did not answer. She made a call, and a uniform arrived, then another, then the city inspector who had signed the permit and now realized his name might be part of a story he did not want to star in. The contractor cut a neat line in the door with a multi-tool. The lock gave up with a sound like a hand slapping a table. Air breathed out from the seam, cool, old, wet. The first inch was nothing, the second, pure darkness. "Flashlights," Mara said, though they were already out. The contractor set a wedge and eased the door back slow. Something scraped the floor from inside. There are rooms that hold a stillness you can taste. The beam found concrete and glint and a trickle of water threading through a crack like a vein.
Another beam caught on low shelves and the damp curl of paper, stacks and stacks of it, bound with twine. At the far wall, a rectangle of wood leaned at an angle, like a door onto a door. It was painted the same color as the wall and would have looked like an old panel, if not for the cheap brass knob, polished by countless fingers or by one person's nerves. O'Connell arrived in time to catch his breath. His hair had resigned years ago. He whistled low when he saw the bundles. "Records," he said, voice thin with disbelief. "Who keeps records in a flood room?" The contractor tapped the false panel with her knuckles. "That's not structural," she said. "You want me to—" Mara nodded. The contractor slid a pry bar under the edge, braced her boot, and leaned. Nail screamed. The panel came away in a gasp. Behind it sat a second door, older, untreated wood, a staple gun's meanness still embedded along one edge. A padlock clung to the hasp like a stubborn tick. From the corner of her eye, Mara saw a slant of cardboard softened by water, a box labeled in smeared pencil, "Summer '79, Deliveries." In the dark, on top of the box, lay a photograph in a clouded plastic sleeve. It showed a bus sign leaning under a spring sky and a small shape near the post. No face, no proof, only the posture of a child who has been taught to wait. The contractor looked back over her shoulder. "On 3?" she said. Mara's fingers closed around the cold body of the lock cutter. She felt the city gather behind her, whole blocks holding their breath. When the bolt snapped and the door loosened on its hinges, the smell rose up. Damp paper, stale metal, a mineral reek like old coins. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then they pulled the second door open, and everything changed. The first breath that came out of the basement was older than anyone alive. Damp, metallic, the smell of iron and something sweet that had gone wrong decades ago. Flashlights bobbed in the dark as boots creaked down the steps, one after another, each officer expecting the floor to give way. Detective Mara Levy went last, her light steady. She'd walked into enough rooms like this to know silence was sometimes louder than a scream. The concrete walls were sweating, a single bulb hanging dead above, cobwebs thick as gauze. But there was order here, too. Boxes stacked in lines, marked in the same cramped handwriting. Deliveries, May '79, July '80, summer. She brushed frost from one, opened the flap. Inside, paper invoices, stamped with the logo of the old bodega that used to sit above them. Every page meticulously dated, some water-warped, others brittle as parchment. "Looks like old inventory," O'Connell said behind her. He sounded relieved, which worried her more than fear would have. "Inventory doesn't get locked behind 2 doors," she said. Her beam caught something near the corner, a pale shape under a blue tarp. She crouched, hesitated, and pulled it back. Not bones, not yet. A crate sealed in clear plastic, lined with fabric. Inside it, a child's lunchbox, faded blue with the image of an astronaut planting a flag. O'Connell's voice cracked. "Christ, is that—" She didn't answer. The air was suddenly too small. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lunchbox, dust falling like gray snow. The clasp still worked. Inside, a peanut butter sandwich turned to petrified pulp, a pencil stub, and a small square photograph. The edges were curled, the colors drained, but she knew the face before her brain caught up. The same photo that had been stapled to the first missing poster she ever signed. The boy, Etan. Mara closed her eyes for one heartbeat, 2. When she opened them, she saw it, a second photograph tucked behind the first. This one wasn't printed from a school portrait. It was a candid, blurry shot, like someone had taken it fast and close. A little boy looking over his shoulder at the bus stop, mouth half open in surprise. "Get CSU, now." O'Connell was already calling it in, his voice a low tremor over the radio. Mara knelt again and felt along the concrete wall behind the crates. The paint flaked off under her gloves. She pressed harder, and the wall sounded hollow. "Contractor?" she shouted up the stairs. You got that crowbar still?" The woman jogged down, eyes wide, handed it over without a word. Mara wedged it between the wall seams, leaned in, and the section of concrete split along an invisible joint. The hollow behind it wasn't large, maybe 4 feet wide, but it was lined in wood, and carved into the paneling over and over were letters like a mantra scratched in desperation. EP, stay quiet. The team froze. You could hear the drip of meltwater from the stairs, the hum of a distant generator above. O'Connell swallowed hard. "He was here," he whispered. Mara felt something stir in the pit of her stomach. Not triumph, not closure, something heavier. Because if Etan Patz had been there, someone had put him there, and someone had walked away afterward. The evidence unit arrived by mid-morning. Cameras flashed, gloves snapped. Every inch of the basement became sacred ground. The lunchbox, the photos, the scratched letters, all bagged and tagged like relics. News trucks started forming outside before the first officer had time to breathe fresh air again. By noon, the story had a pulse. New York's most enduring mystery reopened. Reporters yelled questions through the barricade. Is this linked to the 1979 Patz case? Did police mishandle the investigation? Mara ignored them. She sat on the back of the ambulance steps, notebook on her knees, cold seeping through her coat. She stared at the photo they'd found, the candid one, the boy looking back. It wasn't just a child's face anymore. It was evidence. And evidence didn't lie, but the hand that took the picture might. A younger detective, Torres, came over. "Boss," he said quietly, "you should see this." They walked around the side of the building where the contractor's crew had cleared snow from an old drain pipe. The pipe led straight from the basement's lower vent to the alley, large enough for a small object, maybe even a small person, to pass through if someone was desperate. On the other end, behind the New Market's trash bins, they'd found something wedged in the rust. A leather wallet, soaked and split. Inside, a driver's license so faded you had to hold it under light to read the name. Pedro Hernandez. Issued 1979. Address, Prince Street, New York City. Mara's pulse spiked. Where was this exactly? Wedged under the drain lip, half buried in ice. We thought it was trash. She stared at the name, the date. Hernandez had been the man convicted decades later, the bodega clerk who'd confessed, then recanted, then been convicted again. The case that never felt right, that always left questions scratching at the edges of the truth. But the idea that his ID ended up here, in the same basement, made her throat go dry. Torres came over. "You think he dropped it?" "No," she said, cutting him off. Someone wanted it to be found. That night, the file came back to life. Old photographs spread across her desk like ghosts. Court transcripts, confession tapes, statements from witnesses long dead or long discredited. Hernandez had confessed to luring the boy into the store's basement, but no physical evidence had ever tied him to it. The confession was the backbone of the case, and it was riddled with fractures. Mara replayed a clip on her laptop. A grainy 2012 police interrogation video. Hernandez, thin and hollow-eyed, repeating, "I did it. I hurt him. I'm sorry." Then looking up as if searching for approval. The camera operator zoomed in on his hands, ringing, trembling, rehearsed. But then something caught her. On the desk in front of him, just out of focus, was a photograph. Not of the boy, of the corner, the same bus stop, the same lamppost. And in the background, faint but visible, was a reflection in the window of a van parked at the curb, beige, no plates. Her stomach dropped. "Ray," she whispered to herself. The furnace repairman from the original canvas, the one who described the van, the one who disappeared from the city 3 months later, never returning calls. She dug through the digitized reports. Ray's full name, Raymond Lasky, filed as a witness, not a suspect. His last known address was in Queens. The number listed had been disconnected since 1980. She found him anyway. People leave traces, public records, property filings, forgotten mail. He'd moved north, changed his name slightly, remarried, retired. He was 73 now, living alone outside Albany. At 2 a.m., Mara sat staring at the old photograph again, the one from the basement wall. EP, stay quiet. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You should stop digging. The basement was only half the story. No signature, no traceable sender, just those words, cold as the city itself. Mara didn't respond. She stood, grabbed her coat, and turned to the window. Snow was falling again, soft, endless, the kind that swallowed sound. She whispered to herself, half the story? Then show me the rest. And somewhere across the city, under the hum of sodium streetlights, a man with dark hair and a long memory stepped out of a parked beige van that had no plates.
The snow had started again, soft and relentless by the time Detective Mara Levy reached the small gray house in Albany County. The sky was the color of unpolished steel, the kind of light that made everything look like memory. Her car engine ticked as it cooled. No neighbors were outside, no footprints but hers. Raymond Lasky, or whatever name he was living under now, answered the door before she could knock. He was older than his last file photo, beard gone white, eyes bright and cautious. He didn't ask how she'd found him. People who have run for half their lives never do. I figured one day, he said, opening the door wider. It's always one day, isn't it? The house smelled of old wood and cigarettes, the kind of place built around habits. A kettle whistled in the kitchen. He shut it off without pouring anything. You're here about the boy, he said. Mara nodded once. You saw him, didn't you? Ray smiled, not warmth, but fatigue. I saw a lot of things. That doesn't mean anyone wanted to hear them. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table. There were no photos on the walls, no keepsakes, just a radio, a coffee mug, a stack of unopened mail. You told police about a beige van in 1979. You said it was parked behind the bodega. He looked down, rubbing his thumb along a crack in the table. Yeah, I said that. Then a week later, 2 guys from downtown came by my job, said they were detectives, said to keep my mouth shut if I liked my pension. You think they were police? His laugh was hollow. They had badges. Could have been from anywhere. One of them knew my daughter's name. That was enough. Mara leaned forward. Who were they, Ray? Names, faces, anything. He stared at her for a long time, then reached for the radio and turned the dial until static filled the air. You don't understand. This thing, it was bigger than that one boy. That's why they buried it. You open that basement, you open a line straight through City Hall, straight through the old precinct. Mara felt a tremor start in her hands. You're saying cops were involved in... He cut her off. Not cops, a cop. One who'd gone private. The kind who cleans up messes, not solves them. He looked out the window, snow thickening against the glass. He called him Lenny Hayes. You'll find him if you look at the old missing persons task force roster from '79. He was there the day the Patz file went cold. Mara made a note, but she didn't need to. The name was already written into her nerves. He had that van, Ray said quietly. He used it for stakeouts. Said it was off books, beige, no plates. I saw him at the corner that morning, talking to the kid. I thought it was just a friendly cop keeping an eye out. And you never told anyone? I did, once. 2 months later, they found my tire slashed and a note on my windshield that said, "Don't misremember." After that, I kept my head down.
Silence pooled between them. The radio hissed softly. Outside, the wind lifted snow from the trees and tossed it like smoke. Mara stood. Where's Hayes now? Ray didn't look up. Dead, I think. Heart attack, or maybe they made it look that way. Either way, he's been gone 20 years. She exhaled slow. Then how do you explain this? She pulled the printed text message from her coat pocket, the one that said the basement was only half the story. Ray read it, frowned, and pushed it back. That's not him. He wouldn't warn you. Then who? He hesitated. His partner. Partner? Ray nodded. You ever wonder why that confession came out of nowhere? Why Hernandez just happened to tell a priest who just happened to tell police? That priest wasn't random. He used to run a youth shelter downtown. Hayes helped fund it. You follow the money, you'll find your partner. By the time Mara left, the snow was waist deep. The radio in her car picked up a local weather alert, then cut to static. She glanced at her phone. No signal. The road back wound through empty woods, quiet and white. Halfway down the hill, headlights appeared behind her. Close. Too close. She couldn't see the car, just the glow. It stayed there for 5 minutes, 10, not passing, not falling back. When she finally pulled into a gas station, the lights turned off and disappeared into the trees. She called O'Connell as soon as she hit service. She said, I think someone's tailing me. Then you're close, he said. You dig up that name, Hayes? And a partner, she said. Someone who used a church as a cover. There was a pause. You're not gonna like this. The shelter's records burned in a fire back in '88, but the grant that kept it open, it came from the city comptroller's office. You know who signed off on it? Who? Deputy Comptroller Leonard Hayes. He quit the force 6 months before the disappearance. I felt my pulse climb. So he went private, like Ray said. Worse, he went upward. Money laundering, false charities. Every investigation hit a wall. Guess who handled the first internal probe? Who? O'Connell's voice cracked. My old boss, the one who retired after the Patz conviction, Captain Doyle. I remember Doyle. Sharp, charming, the kind of man reporters liked. He'd been the face of the case for years, the man who told cameras, we got our guy. O'Connell continued. He's still alive, lives in Jersey. He gave testimony at the appeal last year. Send me the address. Mara, maybe don't send it. She drove through the night. The city lights eventually rose out of the snow like embers, orange and trembling. Doyle's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. Immaculate lawn, American flag, a mailbox shaped like a sailboat. His car was in the driveway, engine idling, frost climbing the windows. She knocked. No answer. Knocked again. The door creaked open, unlatched. Inside, the heat was on, but the air smelled wrong. Copper and bleach. She followed the noise of a television playing somewhere in the back. A talk show laugh track echoed through the hall. Then she saw him.
Captain Doyle slumped in his armchair, eyes open, mouth slack. A neat hole under his jaw. The gun still in his lap. On the coffee table beside him lay a manila envelope and a cassette tape marked in black pen, Prince Street. Mara didn't touch the gun. She picked up the tape. The label was smeared but legible. She slipped it into a handheld player on the shelf and pressed play. Static. Then a voice. Male. Calm. Familiar. Detective Levy, if you're hearing this, then the story found you. You think you solved it, but you only chased the ghost we built. Hernandez confessed because he was told to. We needed a villain. The boy's gone, and no one can change that. But we kept the city clean. We made it livable.
pause. Breath. I used to watch that corner every morning. The kid never looked up. You tell yourself you'll do anything for order, until the thing you do won't leave you alone. Doyle tried to fix it his way. I fixed it mine. Now you'll have to live with the truth. The tape ended. Mara stood in the silent room, the weight of decades pressing against her chest. Through the window, dawn broke weak and colorless. Outside, a beige van sat idling at the curb, exhaust curling like smoke. She raised her phone, snapping a single photo of the van. When she looked again, it was gone. Nothing but tire tracks leading toward the river. The tape hissed once more, as if restarting, and a faint voice, almost swallowed by static, whispered, "He never left the city." Mara stepped outside. The cold hit like a confession. Somewhere out there, in a city that had forgotten the boy but not the fear, the real story was still moving, alive, quiet, unfinished. She got in her car, started the engine, and whispered to no one, "This time, I don't stop digging." And behind her, far down the block, a camera flash flickered once from inside a parked van.
They thought the case was finally closed, but some disappearances never end. They just change shape. If you thought this one was dark, wait until you hear what came next. Hit subscribe before the next truth disappears.